Imaginary numbers. The first part of your notes, I give you reference to going to a website. That website's at Purple Math. It's listed here and it's on your notes. To complete the information, you need to have done that before you actually watch this video. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and pause the video and go to that website, read through the information and answer the questions that are on it. Okay? If you've already done that, then let's go ahead and get started on our imaginary numbers lesson. Okay? Let's look at the first example. What we're going to do with imaginary numbers is we're going to simplify them just like we did with the radicals Miss Dalton did for you in yesterday's lesson. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify the square root of negative 16. Now, negative 16, you can't take the square root of that, because if I do 4 times 4, that equals positive 16. And if I do negative 4 times negative 4, that also equals positive 16. So no number times itself is going to be negative 16. So we have to figure out how to handle that. And we'll do that with the imaginary number. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of negative 1 times 16. And now by our rules, we can change that to the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. Alright, now the square root of 16, that's easy. That's 4. And the square root of negative 1, what you just learned by going to that website, was that we call that I. So if I have I times 4, we're just going to call it 4I. So that's how I simplify this. Alright, and there's my answer. That's the simplified form. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, the square root of negative 27. So since it's got a negative under the square root, we're going to have to write it and break it up here. So we're going to do this. We're going to make it negative 1 times 27. The square root of negative 1 times 27. And what that equals is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 27. Now the square root of 27, we can simplify that. It's not a perfect square, but if I break down 27 into prime factors, alright, I'll have 3 times 9, and that 9 is 3 times 3. So I got 3, 3, and 3. Now remember, if we have two of those, we can put them together. So I'm going to have the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 3 squared. That's going to take the first two, and then I have that extra 3 there, times 3. So I have the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 3 squared times the square root of 3. Now, the square root of 3 squared, that just becomes, if you remember from yesterday, that just becomes 3. The square root of negative 1, what we learned from our notes a while ago, is that's just going to be I. And the square root of 3, that's simplified, so we just leave it there. So that simplifies down to 3I times the square root of 3. Okay? Alright, we got one more. Let's go ahead and try it. This last example is negative 6 times the square root of negative 24. So what we're going to do is, whatever we get from here, we're going to multiply it by negative 6. Alright? So I want you to take just a moment and try to simplify the square root of negative 24 on your own. So we'll have negative 6 times whatever you come up with. Okay? So pause the video, go ahead and do that, and then turn it back on. Okay, so hopefully you got that worked out. Let's go ahead and work it out. The square root of negative 24, that's going to be the square root of negative 1, and then we're going to factor out 24. So that's going to be 2 and 12. 12 is 2 and 6. 6 is 2 and 3. Okay, so we've got, I'm going to put the two 2's together. So I'm going to have times 2 squared. And then I have this 2 left over, and this 3 left over. So that's going to be negative 6 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 2 squared times the square root of 2 times the square root of 3. Okay? Now, the square root of 2 squared, that's just going to be 2. The square root of negative 1, that's going to be our I. And these two cannot be simplified any further, so we're going to bring them back together and do the square root of 2 times 3, which is just the square root of 6. I have negative 6 there. So this becomes the square root of 6. So when I look at all this together now, negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. I've got my I, and then times the square root of 6. You notice we always put the I in front of that radicand, okay? In front of the radical symbol. Alright? Hopefully that made sense. Go ahead and submit your WISC, and we'll see you in class.